G'day you guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So guys, it is time for another Pete's, I almost said Poots, Pete's 2 cents, which is where I answer your questions. Now, I'm going to jump on Instagram here, and I'm going to open up last week's questions that you guys gave me. Remember, I'm going to try and do these stories on a Monday where I ask you guys to ask me anything you'd like. And that's where I'm going to get these questions from in order to do these episodes. A little announcement too, another one to tell you about, is that I'm going to start trying to recycle a few of the really old podcast episodes that I thought were really interesting and maybe useful for you guys. Because there's loads from probably about 4 or 5 years ago that are sort of in the middle of the entire episode list that just aren't getting anywhere near as many listens as the ones at the very start of the podcast and the ones at the very end, which makes sense, right? Because people are listening to the most recent episodes and then working backwards, or they're going to the oldest episodes and working forwards. But yeah, as a result, there are plenty of episodes in the 300, 400, 500 sort of episode number mark where they've only got 100 or so listens, but they're really good episodes that were really popular at the time. And I'm saying 100 or so listens since I migrated the podcast. So yeah, anyway, you may see some of these show up. I think we're going to be publishing them on a Wednesday. I have to double check that, but these episodes I'm going to try and do one a week so that you guys have extra content that you can listen to. All right, so got the questions up here in front of me. First one, Dr. Rekhapner. Hopefully I've said that right. How's your day going? My day is going well, mate. I took the kids to daycare this morning with my wife. I then took her to work, drove her into Geelong, and then I went to a guitar shop called A&B Music in Geelong. Shout out to them. They are absolutely brilliant. The guys there that I always interact with and chat with, Tim and Nick, they are awesome. And yeah, I've bought a bunch of guitars from the store over the last year or so, and they're just, always really helpful. There's a great range of different guitars there if you guys are guitarists. And the best thing about the store that I like is that they've got loads of used guitars. So I love going in there and playing all of these guitars from, as far back as the 60s sometimes, and it just being kind of a really good learning experience. If you're into guitar, if you're into musical instruments, it's really interesting to play all sorts of different types of instruments from different periods, decades that are used for different styles, etc. Because, there's just always, I find the differences between these sorts of things really cool when I'm into a hobby. So, went there and played a bunch of guitars this morning. 2 of them I'm looking at buying. I can't decide which one yet. Maybe I'll get both, but I'm going to have to save up my pennies before I can do that because they're quite expensive. So we'll see how we go. But yeah, that was my morning. I came back home, did some chores around the house, watered some plants, took care of the cats, hung out with them for a bit. Peaches has just walked into the room and is probably wanting a cuddle. She's going to jump on the bed here and have a cuddle with me. And then I did the dishes and had some lunch, had a tuna salad for lunch. All right, that's how I'm doing, and I hope you guys are having an amazing day as well. All right, so this one comes from Khun1009. What's the difference between I was like, he was like, and I go/he goes when quoting someone's words, when quoting what someone said? I was like, so there's no real difference here. Like these phrases, I was like, he was like, I went, he went, I go, you go. This is a way of reporting speech. So if you've said something in the past and you want to tell someone about what you said and you're like quoting yourself literally, you can say things like I said, or I told him or her. Any other ways? I told him, her, I said, I was saying, yeah. But there's other ways of doing it. And a common one that's kind of informal that you'll use in spoken English is I was like, right? To be like, I'm like, I was like, and we'll use this in the present or the past, right? So I'm like, I was like, and then I go, or I went. So these are ways of reporting the speech that you said, and then you would quote literally what you said, or at least, the idea of what you said. So I'm trying to think of a good example. All right, so imagine I said something to my wife yesterday. All right, my kids were doing something funny, right? My kids were playing their little guitars. They've got these like a ukulele and a little guitar, and they were both playing them. And Joanna, my daughter, started singing Baby Shark. If you guys have kids, you'll probably know Baby Shark, right? Baby Shark, do 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 do. It exploded on YouTube and became this huge song that pretty much every child loves and every adult hates, right? It's the bane of our existence because we hear it all the time. Anyway, so my daughter's sitting there on the couch and she was like, Baby Shark, do do. She started singing Baby Shark and playing a little ukulele, right? And so I could say, she was like, or she goes, or she went, or she's like, right? So I can say it in the present or the past. She's like, she was like, she goes, or she went. And then I say the thing. She goes, Dad, listen to this. I'm going to sing Baby Shark. Or she goes, or she went, Dada, look, Baby Shark, doot doot. So that's how you can use it. Is there any difference between these two? No. I would use them interchangeably, right? It doesn't really matter which one you choose, but these are very good informal ways of reporting speech, saying something, telling someone something that you said or someone else said and reporting it, right? So yeah, I'd use both interchangeably. Why do Aussie people use fancy a lot? This one comes from Sunsun0520. Why do Aussie people use fancy a lot? So fancy, use the word fancy, I imagine, is what you're asking, right? As opposed to fancy a lot. Fancy, we use this when we want to say, do you want something? Would you like something? Do you fancy something? Would you fancy something? So we just use this as a verb to mean to desire, to want something, to like something. How would you can't really conjugate it like that, right? You would like something. So yeah, fancy. I don't know why. It's just one of those things where for one reason or another, it's become a word that is very common in Australian English. Another, it's like slang, or it's like words that we use for certain things that elsewhere they'll have different words. For one reason or another, we use it more than other people. A good example might be mate, right? Like, how are you going, mate? Are you okay, mate? Every other dialect of English has the word mate in it, and it means different things, but it can mean a friend, right? He's my mate. The Brits use it quite a bit, but Australians use it, we use it galore, right? We use it all over the place. We use it a lot. Fancy is a similar thing. I don't know if Americans or Brits use it the same way we do and as frequently as we do. It wouldn't surprise me if they still use it, but it's just not as common. The Brits probably do if we do, because we got our English from them. But yeah, we do use fancy a lot, right? Would you fancy some nachos for dinner? My son always wants nachos, so I might say to him tonight, hey, Noah, fancy some nachos for dinner? Do you fancy some nachos for dinner? Would you like some nachos for dinner? Do you want some nachos for dinner? Do you fancy some? All right, let's keep going. This is one that I'm going to be answering in an expression episode. I've already written the episode, but I have to obviously record it. But I answered this question, and it is from Evgen MCGR. I have no idea. There's too many consonants and not enough vowels. Is that like Evgen McGregor or something? I'm not sure. Anyway, they ask, is it true that ciggies are so damn expensive in Melbourne? Yes. But I would say that it's not specific to Melbourne. It's all of Australia. I think the laws regarding taxes that are put on top of cigarettes are nationwide. They're not specific to cities or states or territories. There may be a little bit here and there that's like extra for certain states or territories if they have some kind of decision or ability to put taxes on or take them off certain things. But by and large, these taxes were added on a few decades ago. I think it was the 2010s. I think it was around that period. I remember an ex-girlfriend of mine at the time, Hannah, if you're listening. Hey, Hannah. She was doing a report on this, and I remember chatting to her about it quite a bit. But yeah, they brought in heaps of taxes to put on top of cigarettes, and the government makes, I think it was at the time, it was like $500 million a year or something. And the good thing about it is that it offsets all of the diseases, all the $500 million that was raised from the taxes offsets the amount of money that is required to pay for people who get sick, who get cancer, who get all sorts of illnesses from cigarettes. So there was that aspect of it, which I thought personally was positive, right? The government's getting all this money that they can then spend on healthcare, on hospitals, on all that sort of stuff. But yeah, they've ever increased the taxes on top of cigarettes because, you know, they're pretty much just trying to reduce the number of people smoking. And yeah, I think, you know, it's just one of those things. If you come to Australia, probably quit smoking if you smoke or switch to something else, you know, substitute it for caffeine and coffee because you'll save a lot of money. I think it is about $30 to $40 now for a pack of like 20 cigarettes. And I don't really know the exact numbers, but from what I was looking up, it was something around there. I've never smoked cigarettes. But yeah, you're going to get a surprise when you come to Australia if you smoke. And as a story, it was one of these things, like there were always people who smoked in Australia when I was a kid, and there were even people who were teenagers. I remember every day I would go down the street and get the bus to school, and there was some girls that would get on the bus with me to go to their school. You know, it was a kind of collective area bus that took people to the different schools around. It wasn't just for my school. But they would smoke at the bus stop when they were like 13 or 14 years old. And it just sort of blew my mind. It was one thing that was, for them, it was relatively normal. Because I think, you know, their mum smoked, other people smoked around them. But for me, not being around smokers, not having family members, immediate family members who smoked, it was kind of a bit of a shock. But now, I don't think I know anyone who smokes, especially not my age. And it's almost become one of those things where when you see someone smoking in the street, it's kind of like, why? Right? Like, you would just think there's so many other ways that you could be spending your money, especially the amount of money that it costs. You're literally burning it, right? You're burning your money. You're throwing it into a barrel and burning it. You're literally burning it and inhaling it. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shock. But I remember going to France when I was at high school, and that was a rude awakening for me. That was an eye-opener. That was a very big shock where when we went to the high school, we had like a week where we went to a high school in, I think it was Chantilly, near Paris. And when we went to the school, I remember going to lunch, and outside there was an oval, and there was a huge area of students just smoking anytime there was like a recess or a lunch break. And I remember just being absolutely flabbergasted, right? Just shocked, because children at high school were smoking, right? In Australia, it was illegal for anyone under 18 to smoke. I don't know what the laws were in France. They may have been slightly more relaxed in terms of the age. Maybe it's, you know, you could buy cigarettes at 16. I don't know exactly. But the fact that it was so normalized was really, really weird. I remember being very shocked. And then I think they were probably equally as shocked as at us, being like, do any of you guys from Australia smoke? And all of us were like, no. Another thing that really shocked me was when I went to Asia. I remember, I believe it was in Sulawesi. I went to Sulawesi, an island in Indonesia. And cigarettes were so cheap. They were like 50 cents a carton, right? A box. It was just ridiculous. And I remember being so kind of ethically and morally kind of shocked when my supervisor at the time was using cigarettes to pay people to carry our stuff to a campsite, right? So we had to hike up these mountains and get to a certain area. And in order to do so, we had to effectively get like a whole group of men to carry all of our stuff. It was like 60 guys helped us carry all this stuff into the jungle for 10 of us to do this work over a 3 or 4 week period. And I remember asking him why he'd bought so many cigarettes and was carrying them all in a bag, a huge bag. And he was paying these people in cigarettes because that's what they'd requested. And I remember just being like, some of these people are children. Like, some of these guys are kids, and he's like, it's not for me to judge. It's not for me to tell them what they can or can't do. I'm not, from their country. I'm not from their town. I'm not their dad. I'm not the town leader. It's not up to me. And I remember just being so kind of like, this seems so messed up. Like, I was like, I don't know. It's one thing to give them money and then they go and spend it on whatever they want. But it was kind of, for me, it was like, it's another thing to be buying cigarettes and giving them directly to these people, many of whom were kids, as payment. I don't know. It felt weird. But, again, maybe that's just the culture I'm from, the upbringing I've had. And maybe you could say, you could go, you could be like, who are you to judge, So, yeah, anyway, that's the story with cigarettes in Australia. Okay, so this one comes from Giant Hogweed. Is the intrusive R a feature of Australian English? Yes, so I have done an episode on the intrusive R on YouTube. You'll find this. Just type in Aussie English intrusive R. You'll also find it on the podcast. The audio will have been uploaded as a podcast episode. The intrusive R is where an R sound appears despite the spelling not having an R in the spelling of the words or word, right? So a good example might be if I were to say drawing. I'm saying draw ring, right? I remember having a conversation with my wife about this. She said something like draw wing one day, and I was like, what? What did you say, draw wing? You want me to draw a wing, like of a bird? And she was like, no is doing a drawing. And I was like, no, you mean draw ring. The W is related to the A and the vowel sound, the or vowel sound. But as a result of the or vowel sound linking to the I in the syllable ing, right? Draw ing. To link those two vowels, we use an R sound. Draw ring. Draw ring. Another example would be Australia, right? Australia, there's no R at the end of Australia. Australia. But if I said Australia is big, I would use the intrusive R. The R sound will appear between the words Australia and is. Australia is big. Australia is big. Australia is big. So it's used to link vowel sounds together. In English, you'll have the usual y sounds, w sounds, and r sounds in Australian English to link vowel sounds. All right, let's keep going. Let's push on. Okay. Hadars 2. What does Waltzing Matilda mean? I really like this song. So I've covered this in an episode before, one of the expression episodes, I believe. Someone asked this same question, and I looked it up. And I believe that it is from German. I'm trying to remember what exactly it meant when it was used in German. Oh, waltzing. So waltzing was used in German to mean, I think it was like walking. It was someone who would walk around the countryside and do different sort of like physical labor jobs, if I remember correctly. And so this became a thing used in Australia when you were waltzing Matilda. Matilda was a slang term for a swag, right? So a swag is like a bag with your sleeping gear in it that you would carry around, right? You sleep in a swag, so you're camping. It's usually for a single person. So a swag man back in the day, 100, 200 years ago, was a man who would like walk around with a swag on his back that he could use to sleep in different places. And these guys were going from place to place looking for odd jobs to do, right? They were looking for work. They might just walk onto a farm and be like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I can do these jobs. Is there any work here? And so Matilda is I guess it's a German name, right? And, we use it in English. But it was used as a slang term for a swag, and the idea of waltzing Matilda would be like doing the dance or waltz with a girl. If you're waltzing Matilda, though, it was kind of like you're walking around with your swag from place to place, right? So that's where it came from, and that's where that song comes from. Waltzing Matilda, you'll be waltzing Matilda with me. The idea is the song is about a swag man, right? That's walking around. He's a vagrant. A vagabond, maybe you could say, who goes from place to place looking for work. And I think in the song, he's a thief who steals a bunch of jumbucks, a bunch of sheep. The police catch up with him and he jumps into a billabong and drowns. So it's a pretty, I think it's by Banjo Paterson, isn't it? So it's a pretty dark poem and song, but yeah, you'll hear it all over the place in Australia. And then you have things like the Matildas, right? The Australian Socceroos are the male team, the Matildas are the female team. They'll be named after Waltzing Matilda, right? Matildas. Okay, how can I convince my mum to breed a cat in my home? You got to help me, mate. This is also from Hanaz. How to convince your mum to allow you to breed a cat In your home, you gotta help me, mate. I should have read that before I read it out loud. God. Well, I mean, you have to obviously find some benefits to it one way or another, and you have to try and convey those to your mother. Are you going to be breeding the cat to be able to make money? You know, you're going to sell the kittens to other people. Are there going to be other benefits of breeding the cat? Is it a really nice cat? Does your mum like the cat? I guess I would probably focus on the benefits of doing so, why you want to do it, why it's important to you. Is it going to help you emotionally? You know, do you need an emotional support cat in the house, and breeding it is going to help you help you feel a lot better and give your mum a break as a result? I don't know. You're going to have to find these positives and then try and convey them to your mum. Good luck. Let me know how it goes. What do Australians say when they're surprised? I guess it depends on the situation, and this one comes from Astrid Johansson. It's going to depend on the situation, and it's going to depend on how informal or formal a person's being, right? Like if I'm with mates and they're all boys, they're all men who are, pretty informal kinds of guys, I'll probably swear, so if something happened, maybe I don't know, someone scares me, I'd probably be like, whoa, fuck, what was that? Or fucking hell, Jesus, what the fuck? I could say all these sorts of things in a very informal situation where obviously swearing isn't a big deal. If I'm, at work, I probably wouldn't use that kind of language, right? It could make people feel uncomfortable. You want to be professional, so you might say something like, struth, or, Jesus, or gosh, golly, blimey. Struth might be the one to stick to. Bloody hell, what was that? Bloody hell. Jesus, So yeah, we'd use those sorts of things to show that you were shocked or surprised or impressed. But yeah, anytime you use swear words, it's very informal, and you want to avoid doing that in any kind of professional environment, right? Okay. Let's keep going. I might do a few more before my voice conks out. Why are the Australian laws so rigid regarding cats transferring from overseas? This one comes from Mona Golami. Okay, Golami. So if you want to bring pets in from overseas, it's not just about cats. It's going to be any pets. And there'll be certain animals you can't bring in. Like if you're from Texas in the US and you've got a pet tiger or a pet chimpanzee or something, you can't bring those into Australia. Or at least it would be so difficult to do so. You would need something like a zoo license in order to be able to have those kinds of restricted animals. So it's very difficult to get any of those kinds of non-native animals. Domesticated animals, things like cats and dogs, they're probably the easiest pets to bring over. You can do so, but they have to go through quarantine to make sure they don't have any diseases. And it's because in Australia we don't have a lot of the diseases that other animals have overseas, right? Like you can get diseases like rabies in the US, and I don't know if that's common in Europe or not, but it's definitely common in the US, in America, right? Mammals can get rabies. That's why you can have rabid dogs. We don't have that here. We don't want that here. So that's why a lot of animals have to go through quarantine. They have to be vaccinated. You have to pay a fee, obviously, for that process to take place, and it can take months to complete. So yeah, this is why I think if you look at there was a news story, I think it was with Johnny Depp when he was with Amber, I can't even remember her name, the one that took him to court, or that he took to court, whatever it was. They came over on a private jet and had their dogs in the jet, and they got fined by the Australian government from memory, because you've illegally brought in some animals, right? So it'd be like me, it'd be the same as me just bringing any animal to another country with no permit, with no, not asking anything. I'm sure they were like, oh, it's fine, they'll stay on the plane, but, I'm Johnny Depp, I'll do what I want. But, they got fined. Okay, this one comes from Amaro. My silly question is, why do I keep struggling with my English? What can I do more? Well, I think you need to tell me a bit more about what aspects of your English you're struggling with. The typical thing would be, if we kind of zoom out, it's probably that you're not working on the areas of your English that need improvement. You're probably at a level where you're proficient in the language, you're fluent, you can speak well enough, you can get by, You can have a fluent conversation with most people in most situations. And as a result, and this happens with everyone, this isn't just you and this isn't just English. Anytime anyone learns a foreign language, I think that's the intermediate plateau, right? Where you get to a point where you're good enough to get by, but you don't keep pushing as hard. Because you can use the language to do most things, even if you're making mistakes, even if you run into problems of communication from time to time. It's not that big a problem. So you kind of don't really need to improve a lot of things, but you're probably still aware of these times and situations where you do run into issues where you can't express yourself as easily as you would in your native language. And this is my situation in Portuguese, right? So I can use myself as an example. My Portuguese, I always get compliments on it from my wife and her friends, but I know deep down that it is nowhere near good enough, right? Like I know that I can talk about common things. My wife and I use Portuguese every day, and we speak about things like the kids, about housework, about driving, about friends, about all these topics that are, everyday topics. But I am acutely aware of anytime the conversation goes to an area that I'm not comfortable with, right? I'm very aware of that. Whereas my wife may not be aware of it. And I can probably navigate those situations pretty well to make it look like I'm doing okay when I'm not, if that makes sense, right? Like, I'm sure all of you guys have had conversations where you don't really understand what the other person's saying 100%. You know that you can you understand the words, but you don't necessarily understand the message, if that makes sense, right? You get a bit lost, but you don't want to look like an idiot, so you kind of make it look like you understand. Right? I do this all the time. You may even do this in your native language, right? I remember one time my wife and I walked into a supermarket and this guy at the front of the shop had a really strong Aussie accent, and he just walked up to me and was like, it was clear that he was making a joke or something because he was smiling and laughing and he was sort of talking to me, and it was a statement. I could tell from intonation that he wasn't asking me a question. And he said, in this really strong accent, something like, right? And I remember just looking at my wife and being like, looking back at him being like, yeah, that's it, mate. Like kind of as if I understood everything he said and I agreed with him, but I had no idea what he said. And we kept walking and my wife's like, I didn't understand that. What the hell did he say and how did you understand it? And I said to her, I was like, I went, I go. I didn't understand any of that. I just said, I know, that's it, mate, so that it wouldn't be awkward because I'm not going to sit there and ask him to repeat himself, for the 10th time. So I guess long story short, this is a problem we all face when learning a foreign language, and the trick is going to be to constantly be challenging yourself with new content, with new vocab, with new grammar, with more difficult stuff. And you have to find that butter zone, right? Butter zone, Goldilocks zone. You have to find yourself in that perfect kind of position of it's challenging and you're able to do it, but it's still challenging you, right? And it's not too difficult that you're not learning anything and you're finding it, really difficult and hitting your head against a wall, but that it's not too easy and you're not learning anything new, right? So it may be watching new TV series, trying to learn about new topics in the language, having conversations about more complicated things, it's just exposing yourself to new things in the language that you're forced to learn about and or talk about. And that's how you're going to get better at those things, right? So I think that's pretty much the broad scale kind of issue with a lot of people when they say, my English, sucks. I need to improve my English. And I'll be like, first off, it doesn't suck. You're very good. You're fluent. But like anything, you can improve, right? So just keep at it, mate. It's a process that takes a long time. I think that too was a healthy way of looking at things. When I first started learning languages, I was like really kind of obsessed about it, obsessed with it. And I was like, I'm going to learn like 10 languages and I'll do 2 years of one language, then 2 years of another language. And once I've learned them, I've learned them. And you realize pretty quickly that that's not the case. It's an ongoing process like fitness. You can't just go to the gym and get fit in 3 months or a year or 2 years and then just stop and your fitness is maintained for the rest of your life. You have to constantly maintain the fitness And not only that, when you get to a certain level of fitness, you have to kind of be constantly challenging yourself with new exercises or more difficult exercises, different exercises. Otherwise, you stagnate and your body doesn't keep improving, right? So yeah, if you want to keep improving, the trick is to keep challenging yourself with small tasks that are achievable but difficult, right? Where you're learning new things. So there you go. Okay, let's do one more. Okay, this one comes from Habib Ali. Why are Aussies all tall? I don't think they are, right? I mean, I guess it depends on how tall you are. If you're incredibly short, then maybe. But for me, I consider myself short. I'm only, I think, 175, 176 centimeters tall. I think that'd be like, 5'7"? Is it, give or take? Maybe 5'6"? I don't know. So yeah, I consider myself to be short. I think the average Australian man is probably 180 centimeters, give or take, so almost 6 foot. Woman is probably, I don't know, 150 something centimeters. Is that maybe 160? But yeah, I don't know of us as being incredibly, we're not renowned. It's not a stereotype as far as I'm aware of Aussies being incredibly tall. Usually it's Europeans, right? Like the Dutch. I think they're the tallest people in the world, where their average height is, for men, it's like 6 foot something. It's like, what the hell? Why are you guys so tall? But yeah, there are short Aussies, there are tall Aussies. I knew people who were incredibly short all through high school and through university. And anytime I interact with people from around the world, I don't really sort of get these people are all small, or these people are all big kind of impression from specific groups, right? But I don't know. I guess, there is that kind of thing of Asian people to some degree from different areas. I remember being in Indonesia and all of a sudden I felt like a bigger person. And I think, there are just some groups of people, I guess, who are smaller or bigger. But yeah, don't worry. If you're worried about coming to Australia and walking around and feeling absolutely tiny, we're not a country of freaks that are all 6'5". So don't worry too much. Anyway, hopefully that was a good episode, guys, and I answered a bunch of your questions. I've still got loads that I'm going to answer next week for Instagram on the stories. But yeah, thank you for hanging out. I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I hope you guys have an amazing start to 2024 and that you achieve all your English learning goals. If you want to check out all of my courses, all of my content and everything like that, go to aussieenglish.com.au. Obviously, you can sign up for the premium podcast if you would like to support me, or buy any of the courses that I've got that may help you. And other than that, send me a message or a comment or whatever and just say g'day and tell me where you're from. And if you've got any questions, make sure to jump on Instagram next Monday. Click on my stories and there'll be the little question box for me to do the question and answer. Anyway, thanks again, guys. Tooroo.